They say love makes you blind, but at 73, I thought I'd seen enough to spot a lie. Turns out the heart doesn't get wiser with age. It just gets more desperate to believe. I gave everything to a woman who promised forever, only to discover that her wedding vows were just another con. The worst part? I saw it coming and chose to ignore every red flag. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our long-time viewers, and he wanted his experience heard. My name is Harold Mitchell, though everyone calls me Harry. I'm 73 years old, and 3 years ago I thought my story was over. My wife, Margaret, passed after 42 years of marriage, and I figured that was it for love in my life. I had my small house in Phoenix, my social security check, and a modest pension from 30 years in construction. It wasn't much, but it was enough for one old man who didn't need much anymore. I'd wake up, drink my coffee, watch the news, maybe call my daughter Jennifer in Tucson, and go to bed. Day after day, the same routine. That loneliness, it eats at you slowly, like rust on metal. Jennifer kept telling me I needed to get out more, maybe join a senior center or take up golf. "Dad, you can't just sit in that house forever," she'd say during our weekly phone calls. But what was the point? I'd had my great love. Margaret and I built something real together, raised Jennifer, survived good times and bad. Lightning doesn't strike twice, right? That's what I believed until I got curious about this thing called online dating. Seemed silly at first, an old construction worker trying to find romance on the internet. But the nights were so quiet, and the days stretched so long. I started looking at those dating sites, the ones for people our age. Most of the women seemed nice enough, but there was no spark, no connection. They wanted to talk about their grandchildren or their health problems, and I just wasn't ready for that kind of settling. Then Jennifer mentioned she'd heard about international dating sites, places where American men could meet women from other countries. "Just be careful, Dad," she warned me. "There are a lot of scammers out there." I should have listened to that warning, but I was already curious. That's how I found myself on Filipino Cupid late one night in February. The women were beautiful, young, and they seemed genuinely interested in getting to know American men. I felt foolish at first. What would a young Filipina want with an old man like me? But I created a profile anyway, posted a recent photo, and wrote honestly about who I was and what I was looking for. I wasn't trying to pretend to be younger or richer than I was, just a lonely widower hoping to find companionship again. Christina Santos messaged me first. Her profile said she was 34, worked as a hotel receptionist in Cebu City, and was looking for a serious relationship with a kind, stable man. She was beautiful. Long black hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that made my chest tighten. But it was her message that caught me off guard. She didn't ask about money or talk about wanting to come to America. Instead, she asked about my late wife, about my work in construction, about what it was like to build things with my hands. "I think men who build things must have strong hearts," she wrote in her second message. "My father was a carpenter before. He died. I remember watching him work and thinking how he made beautiful things from nothing. You must have made many people happy with the homes you built." We started talking every day. Video calls became our routine. Her morning was my evening, so we'd connect when she got home from work at the hotel. Christina would still be in her uniform sometimes, tired from dealing with tourists all day, but she always seemed excited to see me. She'd ask about my day, tell me about the guests at her hotel, and slowly I started looking forward to those calls more than anything else in my life. "Harry," she said one evening, about 2 months into our conversations, "you make me feel safe, even from so far away. Is that strange?" Her English was good but accented, and sometimes she'd struggle to find the right words. It made her seem more genuine somehow, more real than the polished profiles I'd seen on other sites. I told her it wasn't strange at all, that she made me feel alive again in ways I hadn't expected, and I meant it. For the first time since Margaret died, I was excited to wake up in the morning. I had something to look forward to, someone who seemed to genuinely care about my thoughts and feelings. Christina told me about her family, her mother who cleaned houses, her younger siblings still in school, her brother Miguel, who worked odd jobs around Cebu. Money was tight, she explained, but they managed. She never asked me for anything, which made me trust her more. When other women on the site would hint about financial problems or visa fees, Christina just wanted to talk about our future together. "Do you think you could ever love someone like me?" she asked during one of our late-night conversations. She was lying in bed, her hair spread across the pillow, and the question caught me completely off guard. "Christina, I think I already do," I said, and I meant it. At 73, I was falling in love again, and it terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. The first time she mentioned wanting to meet in person, I panicked. The idea of international travel at my age seemed impossible. I'd never even had a passport, but Christina was patient with my fears. "I know it's scary, Harry, it's scary for me too. But how else will we know if what we have is real?" She had a point. After 4 months of daily conversations, I needed to know if this connection could survive in person. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I applied for my first passport at 73 years old. I booked a flight to Cebu, Philippines, scheduled for early June. When I told Jennifer about my plans, she was horrified. "Dad, you barely know this woman. What if she's not who she says she is? What if it's all some elaborate scam?" Jennifer paced around my living room, her hands shaking with worry. "Sweetheart, I've been talking to her for months. I've seen her on video calls every single day. She's real and she cares about me. I can feel it. Dad, please, at least hire a private investigator to check her out, or let me come with you." Jennifer was practically begging, but I'd already made up my mind. "Jennifer, your mother and I took chances when we were young. This might be my last chance at happiness. I have to take it." Looking back, I can see how desperate I sounded, how foolish. But at the time, Christina felt like a miracle. She represented hope, love, a future I thought I'd lost forever. The warnings from Jennifer, the cautious voices in my head, I pushed them all aside because I wanted this to be real more than I wanted to be careful. The flight to Cebu was the longest 24 hours of my life. I'd never been on a plane for more than 2 hours, and here I was flying halfway around the world. For a woman I'd only known through a computer screen. Every time the plane hit turbulence, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But then I'd picture Christina's smile, remember the way she laughed at my stories about construction sites, and I'd feel that surge of hope again. Christina was waiting for me at Mactan Cebu International Airport with a sign that said Harry Mitchell in careful handwriting. She looked exactly like her photos, maybe even more beautiful in person. She was wearing a yellow dress that brought out the warmth in her skin, and when she saw me coming through customs, her face lit up with what looked like genuine joy. "Harry, you made it." She threw her arms around me right there in the airport, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. Standing next to her was a young man who looked like a male version of Christina. Same eyes, same smile. "This is my brother Miguel," she said, switching to English with a slight accent that I found charming. "He wanted to meet the man who makes his sister so happy." Miguel stepped forward with a friendly grin and a firm handshake. "Sir Harry, welcome to Philippines. My sister, she talk about you every day. Every day." His English was more broken than Christina's, but his warmth seemed genuine. "Thank you for coming to get me," I said, still feeling surreal about the whole situation. I was worried I'd get lost trying to find a taxi. "No taxi for you, sir. You are family now," Miguel said with a laugh. "I drive you everywhere you want to go." The drive from the airport to my hotel was like stepping into a different world. The heat, the traffic, the crowded streets full of jeepneys and motorcycles. Everything was overwhelming and exciting at the same time. Christina sat next to me in the back seat, holding my hand and pointing out landmarks. "That's where I work," she said, indicating a large hotel complex near the beach. "Maybe tomorrow you can see my office, meet my supervisor." I told everyone about my American boyfriend. The way she said boyfriend made my heart skip. At 73, I was somebody's boyfriend again. It felt impossible and wonderful. Miguel drove us to lunch at a local restaurant where they served fresh seafood and rice dishes I'd never tried before. Everything was delicious, and Christina made sure to explain each dish, teaching me how to eat with my hands the Filipino way. Other diners stared at us, the old American man with the young Filipina woman, but Christina didn't seem to notice or care. "Are you disappointed?" she asked quietly, while Miguel was paying the bill. "Now that you see me in person." "Disappointed? Christina, you're even more beautiful than I imagined. I'm the one who's worried about disappointing you." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Harry, you flew around the world to see me. How could I be disappointed in that?" The first week in Cebu passed like a dream. Christina took time off from work to show me around the city. We visited the old Spanish forts, walked along the beaches, rowed a boat to nearby islands. Everywhere we went, people were friendly and welcoming, even when they stared at our unusual pairing. Christina would introduce me as her boyfriend from America, and I started to feel like maybe this crazy adventure was actually going to work out. Miguel became my unofficial tour guide and translator. He'd show up every morning to drive us around, never asking for gas money or payment, just happy to help his sister entertain her foreign visitor. He taught me basic Tagalog phrases, helped me navigate the local customs, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing my stories about construction work in America. "So Harry, you built houses for 40 years? That's amazing. Here in Philippines, many people still live in houses made of bamboo and tin. Maybe someday you can teach me American construction," he said one afternoon while we watched the sunset from a hilltop restaurant. "I'd be happy to share what I know," I told him, and I meant it. Miguel felt like the son I never had, and I was already imagining ways I could help Christina's family once we figured out our future together. But it was the evenings alone with Christina that convinced me this was real. We'd sit on the hotel balcony, talking about everything and nothing. She'd tell me about growing up poor but happy, about dreams she'd put aside to help support her family. I'd tell her about Margaret, about the grief I'd carried for 3 years, about how empty my life had become. "I know I'm not young like you," I said one night. "I know I can't give you the same life a younger man could." "Harry," she said, taking my hands in both of hers, "young men here, they have no jobs, no future. They make promises they can't keep. You are stable, kind, honest. You make me feel precious. Age is just numbers." When she said things like that, looking into my eyes with such apparent sincerity, how could I not believe her? How could I not start imagining a future where we'd be together permanently? The second week of my visit, Christina asked if I wanted to meet her family. They lived in a barangay about an hour outside Cebu City, in a neighborhood that was definitely not set up for tourists. Miguel drove us through increasingly narrow streets until we reached a small concrete house with a corrugated metal roof. "My family is not rich, Harry," Christina said as we pulled up. "I hope you won't judge us." "Sweetheart, I grew up poor too. Money doesn't make a family." The house was tiny but immaculate. Christina's mother, Elena, was a small woman in her 50s who worked as a domestic helper for wealthy families. She spoke very little English, but made it clear through gestures and smiles that I was welcome. There were siblings, cousins, nieces and nephews everywhere. At least 15 people crammed into a 2-bedroom house for dinner. They'd prepared a feast in my honor. Lechon, pancit, rice dishes, fresh fruit I'd never tasted before. Elena kept piling food on my plate and beaming at me like I was royalty. The children were shy at first, but eventually warmed up, especially when I showed them photos on my phone of my house in Phoenix. "America, very beautiful," said one of Christina's teenage sisters, Rosa. "Christina say you take her there someday." "If she wants to come, I'll do everything I can to make that happen," I said, and the whole family erupted in excited chatter. After dinner, Miguel took me aside to the small back porch. "Sir Harry, I want to thank you for making my sister so happy. Since our father died, she worked so hard to help family. She never have time for boyfriend, never think about her own happiness. You changed that. Miguel, she makes me happy too. I haven't felt this alive in years. Sir Harry, can I ask you something? Personal question." Miguel looked serious suddenly, and I nodded. "Do you think maybe you marry my sister?" The question caught me off guard, But as I looked through the window at Christina laughing with her nieces, the answer came easily. Miguel. If she'd have me, I'd marry her tomorrow. Miguel's face split into a huge grin. Then maybe we should talk about Filipino wedding traditions. That conversation changed everything. Over the next few days, Miguel became my guide to Filipino courtship customs. He explained the importance of family approval, the significance of different ceremonies, the expectations for an American man marrying into a Filipino family. It all seemed overwhelming, but also exciting. In Philippines, when man marry woman, he marry the family too, Miguel explained. You ready for big family, sir? Looking at how warmly they'd welcomed me, how naturally I fit into their chaotic but loving household, I knew I was ready. These people made me feel needed and valued in ways I hadn't experienced since Margaret died. As my original 2-week visit started winding down, I realized I didn't want to leave. Christina and I had developed such an easy rhythm together. She'd work her shifts at the hotel, and I'd spend time with Miguel exploring the city or visiting internet cafes to email Jennifer. In the evenings, Christina and I would have dinner and talk for hours. What if I extended my stay, I asked her one night. What if I'm not ready to go back to that empty house in Phoenix? Harry, are you sure? Your life is in America. Your daughter, your friends. My life is wherever you are now, I said, and I meant it completely. That's when I made the decision that sealed my fate. Instead of flying home as planned, I extended my tourist visa and stayed in the Philippines. I moved from the expensive resort hotel to a smaller, more affordable place recommended by Miguel. I started sending regular money back to cover my bills in Phoenix and began thinking of this as more than just an extended vacation. Jennifer was worried sick when I called to explain my change of plans. Dad, this is crazy. You've known this woman for 6 months. You're talking about completely uprooting your life. Jennifer, at my age, how much life do I have left to uproot? I'd rather spend whatever time I have left with someone who loves me than waste away alone in Phoenix. But Dad, what about your house, your medical care? What if something happens to you over there? I'll figure it out, sweetheart. People manage to live all over the world. Maybe it's time for this old man to have an adventure. I could hear Jennifer crying on the other end of the line. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't do anything permanent without thinking it through. I promised, but my heart had already decided. Christina was my future now, and I was ready to do whatever it took to make that official. The proposal happened on a beach in Bantayan Island during what was supposed to be my last weekend before flying home. Christina and I were walking along the shore at sunset, and she seemed quieter than usual. What's wrong, sweetheart? I asked, taking her hand. I'm trying not to think about you leaving. These weeks with you here, they've been the happiest of my life, going back to just phone calls and computer messages. She trailed off, looking out at the waves. That's when I knew it was time. I got down on one knee right there in the sand, ignoring the way my arthritis protested. I'd bought a simple ring from a jewelry store in Cebu City, nothing fancy, but the best I could afford on my budget. Christina Santos, will you marry me? I asked, my voice shaking more from emotion than age. She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Harry, are you serious, really serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making you happy. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. She threw herself into my arms, nearly knocking us both into the surf, and I felt like I'd won the lottery. Around us, other tourists started applauding, and I felt prouder than I had in years. At 73, I was engaged again. That night, we called her family to share the news. The phone line crackled with excitement as the news spread through the house. Elena cried and kept saying "Salamat" over and over, which Miguel translated as "thank you." The younger siblings wanted to know when the wedding would be, where we'd live, if I was going to take Christina to America. We'll figure all that out, I told them through Miguel's translation. Right now I just want to marry your daughter. Miguel grabbed the phone. Sir Harry, this is wonderful news. But you know, Filipino wedding is not simple thing. Many traditions, many family to invite. This will be big celebration. The idea of a big Filipino wedding excited and terrified me. I'd been picturing something small and simple, maybe at the city hall. But looking at Christina's glowing face, I knew I wanted to give her the wedding of her dreams. Whatever she wants, I told Miguel, just tell me what I need to do. Over the next few days, the planning began in earnest. Christina and her female relatives started discussing venues, guest lists, traditional ceremonies. Miguel became my point person for the groom's responsibilities, securing permits, booking musicians, arranging for the reception venue. "Sir, Harry, Filipino wedding is not cheap," Miguel warned me. "Many guests, big celebration, maybe $15,000–20,000 for proper wedding." The number made my stomach drop. That was more than a quarter of my total savings. But looking at how excited Christina's family was, how happy this was making the woman I loved, I couldn't say no. "If that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Don't worry, sir. I help you with everything. I make sure you get good prices, no one take advantage because you are foreigner. This is my sister's wedding too." I transferred the money from my Phoenix bank to an account Miguel had set up to handle wedding expenses. It felt scary putting that much money in someone else's hands, but Miguel had been nothing but helpful and honest since I'd arrived. If I was going to be part of this family, I needed to start trusting them. The wedding planning consumed the next month. Every day brought new decisions: flowers, music, menu choices, guest accommodations. Christina was in her element, glowing with happiness as she coordinated with her sisters and cousins. She'd include me in the big decisions, but handled most of the details herself. "You just need to show up and look handsome," she'd tell me with a kiss. Filipino brides take care of everything else. Miguel handled the legal paperwork, getting my birth certificate authenticated, filing the proper forms with the local government, securing the church for the ceremony. The bureaucracy was mind-numbing, but Miguel navigated it all with patience and expertise. "Don't worry about understanding all this, sir. Very complicated, even for Filipinos. I make sure everything is proper and legal." I was grateful for his help because the legal requirements were completely foreign to me. Documents needed to be notarized, translated, filed with multiple offices. Without Miguel guiding me through the process, I would have been completely lost. As the wedding date approached, I found myself getting nervous. Not about marrying Christina, I was sure about that, but about the magnitude of the celebration. Miguel had booked a church that could seat 300 people, and the guest list kept growing as distant relatives and family friends heard about the American wedding. "How do you know this many people?" I asked Christina one evening as she addressed what seemed like the 100th invitation. In Philippines, family is a very big concept. Cousins, neighbors, people from church, everyone is family. Everyone wants to celebrate with us. The night before the wedding, I lay awake in my hotel room thinking about Margaret. I wondered what she'd think about me remarrying, about me building a life so far from everything we'd shared together. I decided she'd want me to be happy, even if happiness looked different than either of us had expected. Miguel knocked on my door early the next morning with a traditional Filipino barong shirt for me to wear. "Today you become Filipino family. So Harry, this is our tradition for grooms." The church ceremony was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The little church was packed with people, many of whom I'd never met, but who treated me like a beloved relative. Christina looked absolutely stunning in a traditional white gown with intricate beadwork that her grandmother had worn to her own wedding. When Christina walked down the aisle, accompanied by both her mother and Miguel since her father had died years earlier, I felt my chest tighten with emotion. She looked so young, so beautiful, so full of hope. For a moment I wondered what she saw in an old man like me. But then she reached the altar and smiled at me with such apparent love that my doubts melted away. The priest conducted the ceremony in a mix of English and Tagalog. When it came time for vows, Christina spoke first, her voice clear and strong, despite her tears. "Harry, you came into my life when I thought love was only in movies. You showed me that a good man can be kind, generous, and faithful. I promise to love you, honor you, and take care of you for all the days of our lives. You are my miracle." When it was my turn, I could barely speak through my emotion. "Christina, You brought light back into my world when I thought it would always be dark. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish every day we have together. You've made me believe in second chances." The reception was a festival that lasted until dawn. There was a full roasted pig, multiple bands, hours of karaoke, and dancing that included guests of all ages. I'd never seen anything like it. The joy, the energy, the way everyone seemed genuinely happy to be celebrating our union. Miguel gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes. Today, my family gained not just a brother-in-law, but a father. Sir Harry, you make my sister happy, and you treat our family with respect and generosity. We are honored to call you family. As I looked around at the hundreds of faces celebrating with us, I felt more loved and accepted than I had in years. This was what family should feel like. Loud, chaotic, overwhelming, but full of genuine affection. The honeymoon period after the wedding was blissful but complicated. Christina moved into my hotel temporarily while we figured out more permanent housing arrangements. She was affectionate and attentive, but I started noticing small changes in her behavior. She became moody when I mentioned needing to return to Phoenix to handle visa paperwork for bringing her to America. Why do we need to go to America right away? We just got married. Can't we stay here and enjoy being newlyweds? Her question was reasonable, but something in her tone made me uneasy. When I explained that my tourist visa was expiring and I needed to either go home or find a way to extend my stay legally, she became withdrawn. "Miguel knows people who can help with visa extensions," she said. "It's expensive, but maybe easier than traveling back and forth." I was hesitant about more under-the-table bureaucracy, but Miguel assured me it was standard practice for foreigners who wanted to stay longer in the Philippines. "Sir Harry, many Americans retire here permanently. Government makes it possible. Just expensive and complicated. The visa extension cost another $3,000, paid to various officials through Miguel's connections. It felt sketchy, but Miguel walked me through each office visit, translated every conversation, and made sure I understood what was happening at each step. "This is how business works in Philippines," he explained. "Everything requires personal relationships and proper payments. Not corruption, just different system than America." With my visa extended for another 6 months, I settled into married life in Cebu. We rented a small apartment in a nice part of the city, nothing fancy but comfortable for 2 people. Christina went back to work at the hotel, and I spent my days exploring the city, learning basic Tagalog, and video calling Jennifer to assure her I was safe and happy. But cracks started showing in our newlywed bliss. Christina seemed distant when she came home from work, spending more time on her phone than talking to me. When I asked about her day, she'd give short answers and change the subject. "Is everything okay, sweetheart? You seem different since we got married." "Everything is fine, Harry. I'm just tired from work. Hotel guests are very demanding right now." I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. She used to be excited to tell me about her day, about the interesting tourists she met or funny things that happened at work. Now she seemed to be going through the motions of being a wife without the enthusiasm she'd shown before. The family. Emergencies started about 2 months after the wedding. Elena needed money for medical expenses. Her diabetes was getting worse and she couldn't afford her medications. Rosa needed money for school fees. Her scholarship had been reduced, and the family couldn't make up the difference. Various cousins and relatives had urgent financial needs that somehow became my responsibility as the new American family member. Each request came through Christina with tears and genuine distress. "Harry, I know it's a lot to ask, but my family has never had someone who could help when things get bad. Before, we just suffered and hoped for better times. How could I say no to medical expenses or education costs? These were good people who had welcomed me into their family. If I could help them have better lives, wasn't that what family was supposed to do?" I sent money regularly, $500 here for Elena's medicine, $1,000 there for Rosa's schooling, $800 for a cousin's emergency surgery. Miguel handled all the transfers, making sure the money got to the right people and keeping track of who needed what. "Sir Harry, you are a blessing to this family," he told me one afternoon as we walked through downtown Cebu. Before you, we always worry about money. Now family can focus on other things because they know you care about them. I wanted to feel good about being able to help, but the constant financial requests were draining my savings faster than I'd expected. My modest pension and social security weren't designed to support an entire extended Filipino family, even with the best intentions. When I mentioned my concerns to Christina, she became defensive. These are not just requests, Harry. This is how family works in Philippines. When one person has resources, they share with everyone. I thought you understood that when you married me. She was right, and I felt guilty for being selfish. These people had given me love and acceptance. The least I could do was help them when they were struggling. That's when Miguel approached me with what seemed like the perfect solution. He'd heard about a business opportunity, a small resort development project on one of the nearby islands. Foreign investment was needed, and the returns looked promising. Sir Harry, this could be answer to money problems. Instead of always giving money away, you could make money that benefits everyone. Miguel showed me photographs of the proposed resort site, a beautiful beach with crystal clear water and white sand. The development plans included small cottages, a restaurant, and facilities for diving and island hopping tours. Tourism is growing very fast in Philippines, Miguel explained. Government wants to develop more destinations like Boracay and Palawan. This project could make you very wealthy, man. The initial investment required was $45,000, a huge chunk of my remaining savings, but Miguel assured me the returns would be substantial. In 2 years, your investment could be worth $200,000, maybe more. Legal complications prevented me from owning property directly as a foreigner, but Miguel offered to hold the investment in trust for me until I could establish more permanent residency status. Many Americans do business this way in Philippines. Very common arrangement. Christina seemed excited about the investment opportunity. Harry, this could be our future. Instead of you worrying about money all the time, we could be financially secure, maybe even wealthy. Against every cautious instinct I'd developed in 73 years of life, I authorized the wire transfer. $45,000 moved from my Phoenix bank account to an account controlled by Miguel. It was the largest financial risk I'd ever taken, but it felt like the right move for our future together. For a few weeks after making the investment, I felt like a successful businessman. Miguel provided regular updates on the development progress, showed me photos of land surveys and preliminary construction, and introduced me to other foreign investors who were supposedly involved in similar projects. Sir Harry, you made very smart decision, he told me one afternoon. This project will change everything for our family. Christina seemed happier and more affectionate than she'd been in weeks. She talked about our future plans, maybe opening our own small hotel, traveling to other parts of Asia, possibly even bringing some of her family to visit America once I was established as a successful investor. But red flags started appearing that I should have recognized immediately. Phone numbers for the development company went dead. Promised paperwork never arrived. When I asked to visit the resort site, Miguel always had reasons why it wasn't convenient. Permits weren't ready. Construction was at a dangerous phase. Government inspections were ongoing. My daughter Jennifer called from Phoenix with disturbing news. Dad, your bank called me because I'm listed as your emergency contact. They've flagged some suspicious international transfers, large amounts of money going to accounts in the Philippines. Jennifer, I told you I was investing in some business opportunities here. Everything is legitimate. Dad, $45,000. That's most of your savings. What if something goes wrong? Nothing's going to go wrong, sweetheart. Miguel is handling everything professionally. This could set us up financially for the rest of my life. But even as I defended the investment to Jennifer, I was starting to have my own doubts. Miguel became evasive when I asked direct questions about the project timeline. Christina changed the subject whenever I brought up visiting the construction site. The truth started unraveling on a Tuesday morning in November. I woke up to find Christina gone. Her clothes were missing from our apartment, and her phone went straight to voicemail. When I called her work, they said she'd quit the previous week. Without giving notice. Miguel was nowhere to be found either. His phone was disconnected, and when I went to the address he'd given me for his residence, the neighbors said no one by that name lived there. Panic started setting in as I realized how completely I'd been depending on Miguel for everything. My visa paperwork, my business investments, even basic navigation around the city. I went to Elena's house in the barangay, hoping Cristina had just gone to visit her mother. What I found there broke my heart completely. Elena was crying before I even got out of the taxi. "Mr. Harry, I'm so sorry. So sorry," she kept repeating in broken English, wringing her hands and unable to meet my eyes. Through a neighbor who spoke better English, the truth came spilling out. Miguel had been running romance scams for years, using different female family members as bait for lonely foreign men. Elena had been forced to participate because Miguel threatened to harm the family if they didn't cooperate. "Cristina, she really like you," Elena said through the translator. "She say you are good man, kind man, but Miguel, he say family will be hurt if she don't help with plan." The wedding had been real in ceremony but fake in intention, just another way to gain my complete trust before the final phase of the scam. The business investment, the visa extensions, even some of the family emergencies had been fabricated to drain as much money as possible from my accounts. "How much money?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Elena handed me a notebook where Miguel had apparently kept track of the scam's progress. Wedding expenses, visa fees, family emergency payments, the investment, all totaled, I'd lost nearly $80,000. Elena broke down completely, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. "We never want to hurt you. Miguel say he just takes some money, not everything. He say you are rich American, you have plenty money. We know he takes so much." I sat in that tiny concrete house, surrounded by people I'd thought loved me, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The children I'd bought school supplies for wouldn't look at me. The cousins I'd helped with medical expenses had disappeared. Even Eleanor, who I'd genuinely cared about, had been acting a role. "Where are they now?" I asked. "Cristina and Miguel?" "Manila," Elena whispered. "They go to Manila to find new people to help. Miguel say this is last time, but he always say that." The reality hit me like a physical blow. Somewhere in Manila, Cristina and Miguel were probably setting up the same elaborate con on another lonely man, another widower or divorcee who just wanted to believe in love again. The wedding ring I still wore suddenly felt like it was burning my finger. I stumbled out of Elena's house and took a taxi back to my apartment, though I could barely afford the fare. My visa was expiring again, my savings were gone, and I was stranded in a foreign country where I barely spoke the language. The apartment felt like a crime scene. Every piece of furniture, every wedding photo on the wall was evidence of my stupidity. That night I called Jennifer and told her everything. She cried, cursed, and immediately started making arrangements to wire me emergency funds and help me get home. But the shame was worse than the financial loss. At 73 years old, I'd been played like a complete fool. "Dad, this isn't your fault. These people are criminals. They're professionals at what they do." "Jennifer, I ignored every warning. You told me to be careful. My gut told me something was wrong, but I wanted to believe in the fairy tale so badly that I threw away common sense. The next morning, I forced myself to go to the local police station to file a report. The officers were sympathetic but realistic about my chances of recovering any money. International wire fraud cases rarely resulted in arrests, and even more rarely in recovered funds. "Sir, these scammers are very sophisticated," the detective explained through a translator. "They use real emotions to make victims believe the relationship is genuine. You are not the first American man to be fooled this way." He showed me a file of similar cases. Dozens of foreign men who'd been scammed by romance operations based in the Philippines. The amounts varied, but the pattern was always the same: online courtship, marriage or engagement, business investments, and then disappearance. "The woman, she probably has real feelings," the detective added, "but the family, they are controlled by criminal organizer. Very difficult for women to escape once they are involved." I wanted to believe that Cristina had genuinely cared for me, but it didn't matter now. Real feelings or not, I was still broke and stranded. The American embassy helped me with emergency paperwork to get home, but the process was humiliating. I had to prove I was an American citizen who'd been the victim of a crime, explain how I'd lost so much money, and demonstrate that I couldn't afford to stay in the Philippines any longer. "Mr. Mitchell, this is more common than you might think," the embassy worker told me. "We process several cases like this every month. Romance scams targeting older American men are unfortunately a growth industry." She gave me information about support groups and financial counseling services, but nothing could prepare me for the emotional devastation of returning home. The flight back to Phoenix felt like a funeral procession. I had a middle seat between a young couple on their honeymoon and a businessman who spent the entire flight working on his laptop. Everyone around me had purpose and direction. I was just a broken old man returning from the worst mistake of his life. Jennifer met me at Sky Harbor Airport with tears in her eyes and a fierce hug. "Dad, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive when you wanted to travel. Sweetheart, you tried to warn me. I just didn't want to listen." The house in Phoenix felt like a museum of my former life. Everything was exactly as I'd left it 6 months earlier, but I was completely different. The man who'd left this house had been hopeful, in love, ready for adventure. The man who returned was suspicious, ashamed, and financially devastated. Jennifer helped me assess the damage. My savings were gone. My credit cards were maxed out from cash advances I'd sent to the Philippines, and I'd missed several mortgage payments. The house would have to be sold, and I'd need to find a much smaller, cheaper place to live. "Dad, you can stay with Tom and me until you get back on your feet," Jennifer offered, but I could see the strain in her marriage that my situation was already causing. "No, sweetheart. I made this mess, and I need to figure out how to clean it up without making your life harder, too." Within 3 months, I'd sold the house Margaret and I had shared for 22 years and moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a senior complex. The rent ate up most of my Social Security check, leaving barely enough for food and utilities. The life I'd built over 7 decades had been reduced to whatever could fit in a studio apartment. But the hardest part wasn't the financial devastation. It was the knowledge that somewhere out there, Christina and Miguel were probably running the same scam on another victim. Late at night, I'd lie awake wondering if the man they were targeting had grandchildren, if he was spending his life savings on wedding expenses and fake business investments, if he was video calling a woman who was just acting out a script. I found a support group for romance scam victims that met at a community center across town. The first meeting was the hardest thing I'd ever done, standing up in front of strangers and admitting how completely I'd been fooled. "My name is Harry, and I lost $80,000 to a woman I married in the Philippines," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm 73 years old and I should have known better." But the group didn't judge me. There were other seniors who'd been scammed, middle-aged divorced people who'd fallen for similar cons, even some younger people who'd been taken in by cryptocurrency romance scams. The common thread was loneliness and the desperate desire to believe that someone could love us. "Harry, these criminals are professionals," said Margaret, a widow in her 60s who'd lost $30,000 to a man claiming to be a deployed soldier. "They study psychology. They know exactly how to exploit our need for connection and companionship. Over the months, I learned that romance scams had become a billion-dollar industry. Sophisticated criminal organizations recruited attractive young people to create fake profiles and build emotional relationships with vulnerable targets. The scammers were trained in psychology, given scripts for different situations, and taught to identify the most promising victims. The wedding was probably real to her in some ways," explained Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychologist who specialized in fraud victims. "These young women often develop genuine feelings for their targets, which makes the scam more convincing. But they're also trapped by family pressure and criminal threats. I started volunteering with the support group, sharing my story at senior centers and community meetings. It was painful every time, but if I could prevent one person from making my mistakes, maybe some good could come from my experience." I flew halfway around the world for love at 73 years old, I'd tell audiences. I thought my age and experience made me immune to scams. But loneliness makes us all vulnerable, and criminals are experts at exploiting that vulnerability. The questions from the audience were always heartbreaking. How do you know if someone really loves you? What are the warning signs? Is it ever safe to send money to someone you've met online? I'd give them practical advice about reverse image searches, video call verification, and never sending money to someone you haven't met in person. But the real message was simpler. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Beautiful young women don't usually fall in love with old men they've never met, no matter how lonely we are or how much we want to believe in miracles. A year after returning from the Philippines, I got an unexpected email from Elena. She'd somehow found my address and wanted me to know that Christina had been arrested in Manila for participating in another romance scam. Miguel had disappeared, leaving her and several other young women to face the consequences. "Mr. Harry, Christina, she asked me to tell you she's sorry," Elena wrote in broken English. "She say she like you really, but Miguel make her do bad things. She in jail now, but maybe better than working for Miguel." I stared at that email for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt. Part of me was glad that Christina was facing consequences for what she'd done, but another part of me felt sad for a young woman who'd been trapped in a criminal enterprise and was now paying the price while the real mastermind had escaped. I never replied to Elena's email. What was there to say? That I forgave Christina? That I hoped she'd find a better life? That I still wondered sometimes if any part of her feelings had been real? None of it mattered anymore. The damage was done, and we were all living with the consequences. Now, 2 years after returning from the Philippines, I'm settled into my new reality. My apartment is small but adequate. I have enough money for basic needs, though luxuries are a thing of the past. Jennifer visits regularly, and we've rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of honesty about my mistakes and her forgiveness. I still attend the support group meetings, though now I'm one of the senior members helping newer victims process their experiences. The stories are always variations on the same theme: lonely people targeted by criminals who understood exactly how to exploit their need for love and connection. The hardest part, I tell new group members, isn't the money you lose. It's learning to trust your own judgment again. These scammers don't just steal your savings, they steal your confidence in your ability to tell the difference between genuine love and skilled manipulation. Some nights, I still dream about Christina. Not the criminal who helped rob me blind, but the woman who seemed to love hearing my construction stories and promised to take care of me forever. In those dreams, she's still the miracle I thought she was, and I wake up feeling loss all over again. But I've learned to live with that. Loss, the same way I learned to live with Margaret's death. Grief is grief, whether it comes from death or betrayal. You don't get over it. You get through it one day at a time until you find a new normal. At 75 now, I know this is probably my final chapter. I'm not looking for love anymore. That door closed permanently in a hotel room in Cebu City. But I'm not bitter exactly. I'm cautious in ways I never was before, suspicious of kindness that seems too good to be true, protective of what little I have left. The other day, Jennifer asked me if I regretted taking the chance, if I wished I'd never gone to the Philippines at all. Sweetheart, I regret how naive I was. I regret not listening to the warnings. I regret losing money I couldn't afford to lose, I told her. But I don't regret believing in love. Even if it was fake, for a few months I felt alive again in ways I'd forgotten were possible. That's the truth I've learned to live with. Love and hope can be weapons in the wrong hands, but they're also what make us human. The criminals who targeted me understood that, and they used it against me with surgical precision. I keep Christina's wedding ring in a small box on my dresser, not because I'm sentimental about our fake marriage, but because it reminds me every day that the heart wants what it wants, regardless of logic or self-preservation. At 73, I thought I was too old and too wise to be fooled by a beautiful woman and a fairy tale romance. Turns out nobody's ever too old to be a fool for love. The only question is whether you'll be lucky enough to survive the experience, with anything left to rebuild from. In my case, I lost almost everything except the lesson itself. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for when we gamble everything on the chance that someone might actually love us. These days, when people ask me about my time in the Philippines, I tell them the truth. I went looking for love and found professional criminals instead. But for a brief, shining moment, I believed in miracles again. At 75, that might be worth something, even if it cost me everything else I had.